right, we are broadcasting live now, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're here with Blair Earle today, ready for anything, catastrophe preparedness. This is a very pressing topic right now, no matter where you are in Canada. I mean, if you look at the summer that we've had, if you look at the last couple of years we've had Fort McMurray, which is something we'll talk about. Well, we've had crazy wildfires. You all remember when New York City was complaining about the smoke that came down from Canada. We had wild floods this year across the nation. And I mean, even right now, we're having a bomb cyclone in BC. Like, there are things happening constantly around this topic. And this really affects our livelihood, our industry. This is super relevant to the conversation about operations and, succeeding right now. You need to be prepared for catastrophes like this if you're in really any region in Canada, looking at the situation that we're in. As I mentioned, across the nation, we're seeing crazy weather events that we've never seen before. So Blair is going to talk about it today, and they have a very comprehensive catastrophe preparedness plan at IAA. They're an auction company that deals with everything from total losses to parts and selling to recyclers. So they have lots of experience in this topic and dealing with all of the crazy write-offs that we've seen from the catastrophes. We'll show you some images here today as well. So we're going to be discussing IAA and their evolving catastrophe response efforts, how preparedness is transforming in the industry. Like, as we mentioned, these are a lot of things that are happening right now, these crazy storms. And we want to offer some insights to the future of salvage operations in the wake of all of these increasing and intensifying weather events here in Canada and across the globe. It's a huge concern. So, Blair, why don't you open us up with an intro about yourself? Let the people know your history in the industry and your experience. And thank you so much for being here today with us.
Hey, Allison, thank you very much. Glad to be here and talk about our service to the whole country, not just for insurance partners, but also how it works in the whole life cycle of a vehicle and supporting the transportation sector and all of the communities. Very proud to talk about our people and what they've done, especially over the last year. A silver lining in a year full of catastrophes, unfortunately, that seem to be growing in severity and frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, I'm the managing director of IAA Canada, and a lot of you will remember our past name as Impact, and we're celebrating our 40th year in Canada. Also very proud to be part of the RB Global group of companies, and we just celebrated 20 years on the Toronto Stock Exchange yesterday, actually. So very excited to be Canadian based. Thank you very much.
So someone just let us know that the chat is disabled. We're looking into that now. Just let us know if anyone has anything to submit, just put it in the Q&A and we'll be able to see it and answer your questions or comments. So Blair, you said unprecedented challenges for CAT responses. This reinforces the critical role of preparation and resilience, especially in this market that we're in. Extreme weather loss across Canada in July and August is $7.1 billion in insurance claims and insurance losses. That's the most costly summer we've ever had, right?
It is, and it's on the record. I think the latest number that's come out in the past 5 or 6 days, it's trending to come close to $9 billion before we get to January 1st of 2025. So it's almost double the amount of the 5.7 million of the previous record.
Yeah, so severe hail in Calgary, devastating wildfires in Jasper we saw this year, and flooding in Quebec and Ontario. We all saw this past summer, and that's just huge. So for the inventory you guys are processing today, what does that look like?
So right now we're almost complete in the processing of the inventory in the Montreal and Quebec floods and the Toronto floods. The Calgary hailstorm this year is, it is unprecedented. The volume continues to come in from the hail cars, and they continue to be posted for sale daily. The storm is much bigger than it was in 2020, and a great thing about the 2020 storm, and surprising I would say this, but because we were involved in a pandemic at the time, the whole response was Canadian based. And I had to give a big shout out to the Canadian operations team led by Chris Cathcart, who answered the call this year with Calgary the Montreal floods going on at the same time, and the Toronto and Ontario floods. And at the same time, the sales and account management team led by Serge Babineau, the information that we've got continuously from our clients to be able to process the flow rate of both of those catastrophes, both in Quebec and in Alberta, happening at the same time. So a lot of effort by a lot of people, but a strong Canadian story.
Absolutely. And how is the mix? You say cars are being listed every single day. What's that mix look like of severity? Is there just cars that have lots of parts on them or that are still usable, or is it complete total losses?
Well, great lead question, Allison. And I think a little bit later, we're going to see that an example of some of the pictures we have, both from our Calgary yard, from the Montreal floods. But, we've got a group of cars that just have roof damage from the hailstorm, and the rest of the car is perfectly fine. And then you've got cars that pretty much have damaged windshields, windows broken out, damaged doors, bumpers. But there's a big percentage of those cars that will go back on the road that are non-branded in the Alberta market and be purchased by our buyers right across this country, whether they're buying them to put back on the road right away, or they're going into the collision network to be used as parts by our strong recycler and by our body shop partners.
Yeah, so that perfectly leads us into our next question, or the major question to ask that I'm sure everyone's wondering here. You've already touched on it a bit, but how are these affecting businesses, partnerships, and other stakeholders in the industry?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is very clear, if you look at the graph I put up, and the information is from Aon, and they've done some great research here. This severity and frequency of storm that's come into effect, I mean, over the past 3 years, the average has jumped way up, and we've had everything from fire to flood, coast to coast, have been affected, as my reference to BC today and what's going on. And also, if we think of the hurricane that went through Atlantic Canada, affected Nova Scotia and hit Port aux Basques really bad. There's no area of the country that's left untouched, and as a result of that, Calgary and Montreal and the Quebec floods happened pretty close together this year. And what happened, some of that Alberta team that was waiting for all the insurers and for us as a company pivoted and came across the country and started working in Quebec until the flow of product in Alberta picked up. So, I mean, one of the things is the clear communication that happens with our partners, and that includes our insurance partners, our remarketing partners. The rental and fleet companies are not immune. Their cars were hit by this as well. And then communicating every day, to those partners and what the flow of product's going to be, and how we can get those cars back into, the automotive infrastructure across the country.
Absolutely, yeah. And if we look at the next slide here, we can see even more of a breakdown with the financial losses that were here, and just, I mean, other catastrophes that have happened in the recent years as well. So let's go on to discuss IAA's catastrophe response plan and preparedness. So I'll give everyone a second just to look at this slide, but if anyone wants these slides afterwards, just reach out to myself or the IAA team. We'll provide the contact information at the end, and we can send you this information as well, because I know there's a lot to take in here. But to move on to the next one here, there has been a lot of experience going and learning going into this catastrophe preparedness plan that you guys have developed. So could you explain a little bit, Blair, about how you see yourselves as IAA when it comes to catastrophe preparedness?
Yeah, and I think before we, jump into some of the great points that was emphasized in this letter back from the Jasper municipality, is that first of all, these are very unfortunate events, and whether it's looking at stats that we did on the first two slides, there's people in communities that are deeply affected. We'd rather have them not happen at all, but we know that the frequency and severity have increased, and they are going to come. So one of the things that we've being prepared for. We've been following, the instances all the way back from pre 2010. But what really got us prepared was what we dealt with in Fort Mac as a company. And once again, the people of Fort Mac and Alberta that went through that and were affected. That was a major event. And a lot of us in the industry never thought that we'd be dealing with those types of things again. And not only have we dealt with the fires, but we dealt with hail and floods. The next thing we're going to be hit with a biblical locust
Plague.
insect
plague.
infestation upon us, plague. But to be serious about this, the event that really got us prepared, like I said, was Calgary in 2020. Our technology and our people were deployed right across the country. We had people fly out and spend 10 days, 2 weeks at a time in 2020, because our incredible team that we have across the border that deal with hurricanes every year and are prepared, they couldn't come over to help us. So from coast to coast, we had people situated in Calgary that did a week, 2 weeks, 10 days at a time, and then they were relieved and went back to their home province. But probably the thing that helped us the most is our technology platform, which is Canadian born and bred, was able to service that business and help out Calgary from all parts of the country, and with the advantage of time zones. So we were servicing, the business early in the morning in Atlantic Canada, and we were going late at night, from Vancouver as well. So really proud of the team. Can't say enough about it. That's our number one advantage, is the people, first of all. Number two is our technology, and then our transportation partners and our insurance partners and our buyers. There's a demand for this product to go back in the system, and we process it, and we communicate 3 to 4 times a day internally and share all the information that we're receiving from those partners. And we bring in extra transportation partners to add in, along with extra pieces of real estate. So I know this is a long answer, but in 2020, we deployed 5 pieces of land, extra pieces of land in 10 days. And that was an advantage to help us what we're dealing with this year, that we were prepared and ready, both with people, technology, land, and transportation and towing partners. So that's where we are today. And it's allowed us to be prepped as we watch the weather daily across the country, coast to coast and south of the border as well.
Yeah, and you have a call center as well. I think you touched on that too, a centralized call center for Canada.
That is right, Allison. Great catch. And we've discussed it before on previous webinars and podcasts, but Canadian call center we brought back and set up next to our biggest branch in the country in Oshawa, and allows us to service the business coast to coast. And when they talk about, we have the fires approach in Jasper, they understand the geography of what they're dealing with, and they're able to deal with the clients either early in the morning, like I mentioned, and late at night. And our technology platform allows us to do that, to be able to service that business, to process the claims faster as they flow through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to touch on what Blair said at the beginning there. I think it's really key that as we discuss this topic, obviously, this is a bit of a sensitive topic. We want to, people lost a lot in a lot of these disasters, and we are not making light of it at any point. This is very serious stuff. And as Blair said, as much as it can be, profitable for business and everything, this is not something that IAA wants to deal with, correct?
That is correct. And, to that point, Allison, I just want to talk about the Jasper effort. And just everybody, if you get a chance just to read through this letter, there's nothing that has made me and the teams across the country more proud than our response in Jasper. It talks about the gratitude and the admiration, the professionalism. But I think what's very important is that we were there to help. And, the total number of cars in Jasper did not have a lot to do with our response. We were there to help everybody and asked to help everybody, no matter if the insurance company was a partner of ours or not. The municipality of Jasper, we're looking for a solution, and they reached out to us. And I got to hand it to the team that went into that area and did that. Our people, responded, and they were there on weekends. They were early in the morning. They were late at night, away from their families, and the efforts to help the people of Jasper to identify the cars that were on the street in front of those homes that were total burnt was an amazing team effort. And we're going to see some of those pictures in the next couple of slides. But I do want to, make sure that everybody understands that people, are away from their families up to 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time to be able to go in and service the communities. And we're extremely proud of what was done in Jasper. Thank you.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that you leverage, obviously we have a commitment to cat preparedness for over 40 years, or almost 40 years now. Congratulations on the anniversary. But tell us about some of the experts that you leverage. I know that we've spoken about Dr. Phil here, and his expertise. Could you explain to the audience how you leverage some of the experts to learn from these strategies?
Yes, and you know what, Dr. Phil, if you think I'm passionate about the automotive industry, and you should hear Dr. Phil, who we've had at our client conferences. He just vibrates with how excited he is in studying, not just hurricanes but total systems. And they start off about 8 months before the hurricane season starts in whether it's coming up the Atlantic, Pacific. And if we went back 10 years ago, we wouldn't even be in the conversation in Canada of what was going to happen with floods or hurricanes or rainfall or tornadoes. And now it's a daily conversation that goes on within the industry in Canada. Dr. Phil researches, and his team from Colorado State researches what's going to happen with those weather systems and puts out a prediction of the pattern and studies it. And as it moves through, whether it's the Caribbean or comes up through the other coast, and the effects and the path it's going to take. And we monitor that information because he provides us insight and is a consultant for IAA, and not just in the US anymore, but in Canada. And if you get a chance at the end, scan Dr. Phil's information will be on there, and it leads to a newsletter, how he came into a client conference. And specifically at that point in time, we were overly concerned with fires that, seem to now percolate every summer. And he gave us great insight to conditions and what was happening with dryness, and learned a lot about how a fire can burn underneath ground from one season to the next, and with a windstorm can restart as the roots of a tree, pop back up and start fire in a dry area. So he provides quite a lot of insight and a great education for all of us.
Yeah, as Blair mentioned, everyone, I'll come back to this slide at the very end when we give the contact information, but there's a QR code on this slide here. If you want to take a minute to take a picture or scan the QR code to get Dr. Phil's information and sign up for the newsletter Blair is mentioning, this could be very, very relevant to a lot of collision repairs that are dealing with, the strategy, the instances of severe storms and CAT responses. So I'll just give everyone a second. But as we go into our next slide, you did mention the footprint. IAA has an impressive footprint and Canadian roots with the RB Global team as well. So I will come back to the slide if anyone hasn't gotten a moment to scan it, but we're going to go to the next one here. And Blair, could you explain the footprint that you have across Canada with IAA?
Yeah, so we're very excited. Our latest opening is in Toronto West in Caledon. And, it adds to our already strong 14 sites that we have. So we've just gone to 15 and continuously adding to our geographic footprint coast to coast. But real important to cat responsiveness in the country is in March of 2023, we were acquired by the Ritchie Brothers team and rebranded as RB Global. And so why that is so important in cat response, it actually provides us 14 extra locations to bring us up to 29 locations coast to coast when we're dealing with that. And in addition, we also add in our partner storage yards coast to coast, especially in the northern part of most provinces and into the territories. And then I've got to give a big shout out to our towing partners who are, make up a big part of our site sale partners as well, that give us additional space and additional yards to service this. And we work on land and adding it all year long to be able to service not just our regular everyday business and the growth that has had over the past 10 and 12 years, but also for cat land to be available once we hit the season, and we know things are now going to start pretty much every year.
Absolutely, yeah. And when it comes down to it, I mean, there's a pretty solid average across here of like at least 3, with the exception of Manitoba, which, sorry, Manitoba, but you guys are a bit smaller. We still love you, but there's an average of like at least 3 per province here.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things, we've got great partners in BC, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan as well. We do business with those 3 provincial governments, and we work with them very closely on servicing that business. But really, really important. I mean, I'd like to give not to exclude everybody else in the country, like to give a shout out to, the province of Alberta and how much we've expanded the footprint in there. I know it shows as single dots in Calgary on the map, but as a result of 2020, we've gone up to as much as 6 locations that we utilize in the greater Calgary area to service, the continued growth of catastrophe events in that province in particular. So,
absolutely. So I'm going to take it back a bit. I know we spoke about the Jasper events, and you've highlighted the mobility of the team and the towing dedication that your towers and people moving the cars are doing for you guys at IAA. But let's look at some of the pictures that Blair was referencing. Specifically, these are from the Jasper wildfires, correct?
That is correct. And we'll lead into some of the other events that have happened this year.
Yeah. So
this is a gentleman that is using our handheld technology and uploading that information on that vehicle. And what he's doing here, he's trying to identify, what this vehicle was and who the owner was to be able to help the insurance industry deal with that person. So you can just imagine they had to flee so fast that vehicles, bikes, snowmobiles, toys were left, and there's not much left to them as a result of this fire. So they took a picture, and we did a geographic locator on it to be able to help the municipality of Jasper with this process. And this is not the picture that absolutely breaks my heart, but the one that follows up and has a picture on the mountains with the pickup truck. I mean, it shows the beauty of that whole area and, how we think of our country. And to see, a loader moving the pickup truck as it's going off into the mountains, you can only imagine that the efforts that it's going to take to rebuild that community and the beautiful tourist area surrounding Jasper in the future.
The paint is completely gone. I think that was the most surprising thing when I saw these images. That's mind-boggling.
Yeah, what's left is not a lot, and we work with our partners in that area, and we process those vehicles locally, to be as responsive to the community as possible, so everything gets processed and nothing gets delayed.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, we'll touch on some of the other events here, the floods that we've seen lots of in recent years.
Yeah, I think what was interesting, I think, for the rest of the country is at the same time, as Jasper and the Calgary hailstorm were taking place, is that the Quebec floods were ongoing, and the people of Quebec and Montreal specifically, had their property, but also the amount of cars that did get hit, because of the older infrastructure in a city like Montreal, and they were water damaged. And so we have a whole process where our towers and our transportation partners, they go into apartment buildings in the city and the parking garages, and have special machinery to take those vehicles out of there. But this one took a little longer to process than normal as well, because of the areas were hit, and there was bridges that were shut down, and people are still processing claims in that area. So we pivoted and brought people back, because some of the original flow in Calgary took a little longer, and brought them back to service the business, in the province of Quebec. And at this time, they're ahead of it and near the end of it on the automotive side, and those vehicles are for sale every day to our buyers. And then some of the team in Quebec have now gone back, and they're currently helping our team in Alberta. So, out of a bad situation, there's a silver lining.
Absolutely, yeah. And I was gonna say, like, I think what a lot of people don't realize too is like I mean, sure, we hear about this stuff in the news through weather events, like hailstorm happens, we forget about it 2 weeks later. You guys are still dealing with this on top of each other. Like every catastrophe is stacked on top of another, and you have to continue to expand your services and just make sure you're serving all your customers properly.
Right. And I think one of the things as Canadians we got to remember is winter starts early for us. So we have a saying in the business that we prep for winter once we hit July 1st. And one thing that has helped us up until Monday was that it took a little longer for the snow to hit Calgary, and we were able to get a lot of vehicles processed. So we're currently digging out with the latest snowstorm in Calgary, and our team out there has been resilient. And this is a year of all 400 plus people across the country, plus our 8,000 partners from RB Global, to be able to help us as the severity of and frequency of cats continue, not just in Canada but in North America. So one thing,
and as a global company, yeah, as a global company, I mean, obviously your rep is Canada, but I mean, as a global company, this is affecting you guys globally. It's affecting you everywhere internationally.
It is. And in previous years, when we've had the ability to, when it's been a slow cat year in Canada, our teams have gone in the United States to help with whether it's the hurricanes coming through Florida, or what's happening in what has happened in North Carolina, for example. And this year, we were relying on our teams coast to coast to deal with everything that we had happening on our side of the border. But we do have the advantage of tapping the shoulder of our good teammates at Ritchie Brothers, and utilizing their land, their people, and their technology, and their equipment. So
exactly, which the next slide
that's a big
shows
advantage
here
for us. Yeah,
this is so explain what's happening here in this photo.
So you're previously asking about the damage, on cars. If you take a close look at this, the quality of the vehicles in this picture are extremely high. And one of the things that the people of Alberta need is that all of those people that were affected in those communities, they still got to wake up on Monday morning and go to work. And they need these vehicles to go back in the transportation, cycle as fast as possible. And that's what we're doing here, is processing the vehicle, and it's going up into the system right away, and then getting prepped to be put in a sale. And once it hits the sale, our marketing team starts focusing on getting that message out to the buyers. And we've been selling these vehicles every day with our daily sales coast to coast, and to make them available so people can get themselves back on the road and continue on with their lives. Unfortunately, on the property side, they've still got to worry about, their homes being repaired as well. So we want to make sure that at least some part of their life is gets back to some sort of normal as fast as possible.
Yeah. Hopefully have a partner like IAA on the home side as well. But also I wanted to point out here or ask the question. So you're mentioning these vehicles are sold. What's the client base for that? You're mentioning that these cars are sold back to people that need to drive. Are they resold as like, are they repaired and then resold? What's the market for these vehicles?
So the market is quite strong, especially in the Alberta market where we sell to the public as well. So
Okay.
they can come in and replace their vehicle with another vehicle. But our dealer network, our body shop network, and our recycling partners are some of the biggest places. And if you look at the damage on this, I mean, it's perfect vehicles to be bought by collision repair if they want to turn around and do a quick repair and get them out in the marketplace.
Absolutely.
Now, at the point in time in Alberta, the shops in Calgary and Edmonton actually were quite busy and are still working their
Yeah.
way through that. And I just want to let our recycling partner and our body shop partners know that the parts to repair those vehicles are available for sale every day on our website, and all of that information will be provided as we get through the end of the webinar.
So we'll just follow up to the next slide. We're nearing the end here. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to let us know in the chat. We'll also provide some contact information for IAA, formerly known as Impact. Sometimes we all still slip up at the end of the webinar. So you guys can reach out to Blair and the team to speak to them about anything today, because I know this is a lot to process right now, kind of like this image right here. But
Yeah.
So this photo as well, this is just another photo from some catastrophes as well, correct, Blair?
Yeah, so this is from Calgary as well, and it's the most amount of vehicles we've ever had in a hailstorm. In 2020, when I was in Calgary, I actually went up to the neighborhood that the hail had hit, and it was like a bear claw took their hand right up against the side of the house, and people were still out driving their cars because the availability of new product in Canada hasn't come back, and they were looking for the vehicles to be drivable as long as possible. So that's what this picture is all about. It shows the different severity on each of the vehicles. The Tesla, looks like it had the back window blown out, and it's just covered off and prepared so it doesn't get full of water if it rains. But a lot of the cars, beyond having the damage of aesthetics, are perfectly fine to go back on the road the very next day. And the ones that aren't are available to be used as parts. But it was a whole range of product, but most of it looks like the product on the left with the hoods dented that is still drivable. And many people in
Yeah.
Calgary, until they can get the vehicle repaired, keep driving it. And sometimes they've had a hailstorm follow it, and the same car gets hit again. So,
Yeah.
not something that we like to see, but it is a fact of the weather systems that seem to roll through the West more frequently.
Absolutely, yeah. Hail City. And that's nothing that a little bit of PDR can't fix, but the worry, again, like you're mentioning, is another hailstorm just hits it again. So
That's right.
I think
Yeah.
the next photo here shows just the extreme overwhelm of vehicles you guys sometimes get in these situations. Can you explain this photo as well? What was this situation? And
Yeah, so this is, very luckily, I talked about the 6 yards in Alberta, in Calgary specifically. We were able to utilize our main yard that we conduct business in every day. And as a result of what happened in 2020, we held on to much of that real estate to be able to continuously process the growing business in the country for us. And that was able to help us out this year. So that's what you're seeing right here is 2 yards back to back, and the vehicles are are lined up in a process which we call four packing. to be able to become more operationally efficient, to be able to move the vehicles through, sell them faster, and be picked up and processed by the buyer every day. So
Kind of,
the
like
key is
triage, right?
it is
Kind
a
of like
triage
yeah.
process, and that was the previous slide, as you saw the gentleman working in our yard with the handheld. As soon as the information comes into the handheld, it's being back up and through our Wi-Fi that's available in the yard, and it just speeds up the whole process. And we're able to do that remotely with our handheld and our system at any of the yards across the country. So as much as it's,
Okay.
I think I mentioned the, fantastic people, the Canadian response, our technology, our land, our transportation partners. It's really a coast to coast effort by our teams.
Yeah, and I think one thing we wanted to touch on that we perhaps might have missed earlier on was the robust training that you all have. I remember reading about the training when we were preparing for this session, and I was just impressed with the simulations and everything that are practiced with your team, and just how much goes into the cat response. So is that year-round training? Is that, like you mentioned, July 1st is when winter starts for IAA, but how often does that training go on, and what does that entail for the team?
Actually, when we onboard someone right now as a full-time employee, a lot of the times they're taken through the CAT training right away. But what we do, we actually put out a response for volunteers to be members of the CAT team. And a lot of the times, what has happened is the people from coast to coast get trained on a regular basis, because previously it would have been, the expertise that we have in Alberta just because of the frequency that happened in that province. But because, as I mentioned earlier, the poor people of British Columbia today, what they're facing with, 160-kilometer winds that are persisting, it really is from Newfoundland to British Columbia. So what we've done is we've trained all our teams in the total cat response, and it's the same system we use every day, the same way we process a car. But one of the biggest things we do is the communication and relationships we have with our partners. When a cat takes place, we have 4 to 5 calls a day with all the cross-functional teams, and we process the information that our partners are giving us. And that way we're able to, you use the word triage, but we're able to respond and plan a triage of how we're going to respond to a cat. So Jasper is completely different than what happened in Montreal and the Ontario and Toronto floods, and Calgary is completely different than what has happened and what is happening in British Columbia right now. So yeah.
Well, yeah, you mentioning all of these situations and these catastrophes that you've all had to respond to, and obviously impending catastrophes, as you mentioned, BC today. I'm sure you guys will see some situations from that as well. But if anyone has any questions, we're going to dive into Q&A quickly now. I just want to pick Blair's brain a little bit on some of the questions we have here. You mentioned, I just want to recap kind of, how does IAA provide a quick response to these cat events? I mean, like, as we mentioned, a lot of the time you have to get volunteers, you have to pull people out. Like, how do you quickly respond, and how quick is this response?
So we watch the weather constantly, and then we communicate back and forth like daily as it's coming, because a lot of the times we've got the warning. A good example, I'll use the hurricane systems. We know that they're coming through, and typically they come up through the south. And then we get a prediction from an expert like Dr. Phil, who predicts it's going to be an extremely dry summer. Be prepared for wildfires, and a lot of the times, the wildfires are continuously burning, and we've got those areas flagged. The operational team, the sales and account management team are able to respond. We communicate with each other as soon as something we know is coming up, and we're on a text message group right away, and then we formalize it and start having those 3 to 4 meetings every day. And then people respond. It's no different. They'll relate it to the cat response with some of our partners with hail. As soon as hail happens, all the flights start getting booked up to go to that hail area right away to be able to deal with it. We're very similar. That team that's volunteered are ready to be deployed. And majority of the time, the experience and the expertise we have is that some of our team members have been here for 30, 33 years, 35 years. And so that subject matter expertise is able to be deployed right away. And we have a project manager on each of the catastrophes that pull the team together and have calls continuously throughout the days and weeks to follow.
Gotcha. Another question. I'm here. I'll stop sharing for a quick second, and I'm going to pull up Dr. Phil's information here for anyone who didn't grab it yet. Let me just pull up Dr. Phil's info. But while I'm doing that, Blair, I'd like to know the client response. We didn't really touch on that information. So how do you respond to there's Dr. Phil's information for anyone who would like to scan it. And just the client response. I mean, these are people, as you're mentioning, that are going through catastrophic events and some of the worst times in somebody's life as a person. So how do you communicate with them about their vehicle, and how do you keep up to date with, you're getting hundreds and hundreds and thousands sometimes vehicles, and how do you communicate with them, and what role does client communication play?
So client communication is critical because it allows us to know the severity and frequency of the claims that are going to flow through the process. So as I mentioned earlier, Serge and the sales and account management team, that information flows through him, and then that flow through comes through our operational team onto our CAT team, and it's instantaneously communicated. So we'll get an idea from each insurance partner, each remarketing partner, whether it's fleet finance, the rental car companies. And a good example is that, the rental car companies that were out at the airport got hit this year. And so we know there was going to be a shortage of cars, and they transported cars in from other provinces to be able to service the customer. All of that information is shared on the CAT calls that we have, and that's part of our CAT plan. And that is run by the project manager, as I talked about. But it is the importance of our partners. And then the buyers start reaching out to us and say, when is this product going to be available for sale? So as soon as we can process it, and we knew this year that this CAT was bigger than 2020, all our partners gave us that information within 48 hours. So that's when we evaluated our capacity and utilization and figured out, hey, we're going to need probably one more piece of land as this came through. And we started on working on that right away. And within 10 days, we added that other piece of land. So it's a pretty seamless process because of the year-round communication we do have with our insurance partners and our remarketing partners.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we've discussed a lot today on the call. And as mentioned, anyone who wants to ask any questions, you can scan Dr. Phil's QR code here and sign up for his newsletter, and I'm sure you can get in touch with him. And then we also have Vinesh, our handy liaison from IAA. So if you would like to contact Vinesh, we will when we send the webinar recording out tomorrow, we will also include Vinesh's email, but it's vmistry, that's VMISTRY at IAAI.com. So I'll put that in the chat's not working still. So sorry about, now the chat's back maybe. There we go. Yeah. Perfect. Okay, the chat's back. So I'll put the chat, put it in the chat here. And everyone feel free to message Vinesh, and he will answer any questions and forward anything to Blair. But Blair, thank you so much for this very comprehensive and really unique webinar that we've discussed. I think this is a really important topic that we need to discuss in the future with the collision repair industry. Obviously, sustainability and catastrophes become a bigger topic. So thank you so much for providing your insight today.
Thank you. And, Allison, I'd just like to say, as much as, it's very unfortunate these events take place. I think it's key for all our, body shop partners, our recycling partners, our dealers, and everybody in the automotive, life cycle who touches it, is that this product is constantly available, to be purchased by daily in our sales, and to be put back on the road as fast as possible, whether that's being used as parts or being ready as a non-branded vehicle to go right back on the road. So thank you to all our partners. Thank you to all our people. I hope we don't have to have a comparison next year of 2025 growing. I'd rather see it being 1/10 of what it is or nothing at all. But I think reality, as we look at those 10, 5-year and 3-year averages, the trends are going to continue.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So thank you for your time. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next webinar. This recording will go out tomorrow for anyone that would like to watch it or send to friends. But again, thank you, Blair, and we'll see you next time on the next Open Dialogue webinar, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Have a great afternoon, all. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.